So if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be, because we never charge anybody anything. But now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You think of European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff. Taiwan, where they took all of our computer chips and semiconductors. We used to be the king, right? We were everything. We had all of it. Now we have almost none of it, except the biggest company is coming in. We're going to end up with almost 40%. Lee Zeldin's working to get their approvals. And it's an amazing company. Mr. Wei, of one of the great companies of the world, actually. They're coming in from Taiwan, and they're going to build one of the biggest plants in the world, maybe the biggest for that. But 64%, we're going to charge them 32%. Japan, very, very tough. Great people. And again, I don't blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that sat right in that Oval Office, right over there, right behind the Resolute desk or whichever desk they chose. Japan, 46%. They would charge us 46%, and much higher for certain items like cars, little items like cars. 46%, we're charging them 24%. India, very, very tough, very, very tough. The Prime Minister just left. And he's a great friend of mine, but I said, you're a friend of mine, but you're not treating us right. They charge us 52%. You have to understand, we charge them almost nothing for years and years and decades. And it was only 7 years ago when I came in, we started with China charge. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China in tariffs. And they understood, honestly. President Xi understood. He said, look, I understand. And the other countries, and they all understand. We're going to have to go through a little tough love, maybe, but they all understand. They're ripping us off, and they understood it. Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. He was a fantastic man. He was unfortunately taken from us, assassination. But I went to him and I said, Shinzo, we have to do something. A trade is not fair. And he said, I know that. And he was a great gentleman. He was a fantastic man, but he understood immediately what I was talking about. I said, Shinzo, we have to do something. He said, I know that. And we worked out a deal, and it would have been a much better deal, but frankly, there were many years left in the deal that was made previous to my getting there, but it was something. If you look at Switzerland, 61% to 31%. Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia. Oh, look at Cambodia, 97%. We're going to bring it down to 49. They made a fortune with the United States of America. United Kingdom, 10%, and we'll go 10%. So we'll do the same thing. South Africa, 60%, 30%, and they've got some bad things going on in South Africa. We're paying them billions of dollars, and we cut the funding because a lot of bad things are happening in South Africa. The fake news ought to be looking at it. They don't want to report it. Brazil, 10%. Bangladesh is 74%. So you see what's going on. Pakistan, 58%. Sri Lanka, 88%. So what we're doing is we're taking not the full, we could take the full 88%. Thanks a lot, Howard. He's doing a very good job. How's he doing, all right? I think you better take it with you. It's not going to last very long. He's going to it's going to follow you down with the wind.
What world leaders are saying about Trump's sweeping tariffs announcement? President Donald Trump has announced sweeping tariffs of at least 10% on most goods coming into the U.S. Here's how countries are responding. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said during a news conference, "For Australia, these tariffs are not unexpected, but let me be clear, they are totally unwarranted." Trump referred to reciprocal tariffs. A reciprocal tariff would be 0, not 10%. The admin's tariffs have no basis in logic, and they go against the basis of our two nations' partnership. Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said, "Free enterprise and competition have laid the foundations of the West's success. That's why Americans can listen to music on Swedish Spotify and we Swedes can listen to the same music on our American iPhones. This is why I deeply regret the path the U.S. has embarked upon, seeking to limit trade with higher tariffs." Ireland's Taoiseach Micheál Martin said, "My priority, and that of the government, is to protect Irish jobs and the Irish economy, and we will work with our companies, multinational companies and Irish companies, to navigate the period ahead." Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk said, "Friendship means partnership. Partnership means really and truly reciprocal tariffs. Adequate decisions are needed." A French government spokesperson accused Trump of wanting to be master of the world in a rare personal attack on the U.S. president. Sophie Primas told French radio station RTL the tariffs would be a hard blow for the international and European economies, but said Europe will continue to negotiate with the U.S. The EU is preparing countermeasures. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen said, "It's beyond me that the U.S. wants to start a trade war against Europe. No one's a winner, everyone loses. Instead of raising walls, we should bring down barriers." Cecilie Merseth, Norwegian Minister of Trade and Industry, told Norwegian state broadcaster NRK, "We are doing the calculations and looking through what has come. But it is obvious that this is serious for the world economy, and it is critical for Norway. What we can at first glance is 20% tariffs against the European Union and at least 10 to 15% against Norway. That is of great importance because we also send a lot of exports to the EU." Karin Keller-Sutter, president of the Swiss Federation, said, "The Federal Council has taken note of the U.S. decisions on tariffs. It will quickly determine the next steps. The country's long-term economic interests are the priority. Respect for international law and free trade are fundamental. Small businesses will be bearing brunt of tariff storm. Small businesses in the U.S. will be bearing the brunt of constantly changing tariff policies that are forcing them to raise prices for consumers," a CEO told CNN. Adam Lepp, co-founder of Astra House, which designs smart typewriters, said he and other small firms had been facing a whiplash of policies that are changing day by day, despite their operation requiring them to plan up to 18 months ahead. He also said some of the tariffs the Trump administration had introduced had nothing to do with trade deficits, but about combating fentanyl trafficking and illegal immigration. "There's just so many different factors here, and it's a lot of changes all at once," Lepp said. "Unfortunately, we're just going to be bearing the brunt of this storm here." The CEO also said small businesses operated in competitive markets and would have to raise prices due to the costs incurred. "There's really no way around it," he said, adding that both consumers and businesses were in for some tough times ahead. Trump's tariff expected to cost $5,000 per American household per year, Economist says. The U.S. tariffs unveiled on Liberation Day are expected to cost each American household $5,000 per year, dealing a huge blow to working and middle-class families, an economist told CNN. Economics professor Justin Wolfers from the University of Michigan said the cost of living is also expected to go up by 6% as businesses pass extra costs incurred onto consumers. "That's going to turn up in prices pretty much as soon as tomorrow," he said. "It's one that will particularly hurt working and middle-class Americans. And so we are going to see pain starting very soon," the professor added. Overseas, Wolfers said poor countries such as Papua New Guinea and Fiji would suffer from damaging effects, Wolfers said, calling Trump's tariffs evil. The idea that they are any threat to Americans is just absurd, he said. Rich economies, meanwhile, appear to be banding together to retaliate, leaving the U.S. alone. All that President Trump has managed to do is isolate Americans from the rest of the global economy, he said. He also said it would be nonsense to suggest Trump's tariffs are reciprocal in nature given most industrialized economies impose low tariffs. This plan will make the United States by far the most tariff-heavy, industrialized nation in the world, he said. Trump's tariffs target some of the world's poorest and most vulnerable countries. Some of U.S. President Donald Trump's most punishing tariffs will target the world's poorest and most vulnerable countries, including those in the throes of deadly civil wars and emerging from suffocating economic crises. 5 countries singled out by the U.S. for tariffs above the 10% minimum: the Democratic Republic of the Congo 11%, Madagascar 47%, Mozambique 16%, Malawi 18%, and Syria 41% are among the world's 26 poorest economies. Collectively, these economies are responsible for just 0.5% of global output and income but are home to nearly 40% of the world's poor, according to the World Bank. In Madagascar, an island of about 25 million people off the coast of southern Africa, more than 80% of the population lives in extreme poverty and survives on less than $2.15 per day. Its exports to the U.S., its second-largest export market, totaled almost $800 million in 2024, consisting of mainly vanilla, apparel, titanium, and cobalt. Venezuela 15%, which also suffered from an economic collapse and humanitarian disaster, relies on the U.S. as its biggest trading partner. The U.S. imported $6 billion worth of goods from the South American country in 2024. Among other countries singled out with the highest tariff rates is Myanmar 44%, a Southeast Asian nation recently hit by a massive earthquake that has killed more than 3,000 people. The country has also been embroiled in civil war for years. Sparked by a military coup, the fighting has seen junta forces battle rebel groups across the country. Trump's tariffs aim to break down other countries' trade barriers, conservative think tank says. The Trump administration is using tariffs as a tool to dismantle levies imposed by other countries and create truly free and open global trade, a director with the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank, told CNN. Richard Stern, director of Grover M. Herman Center for the Federal Budget at the Heritage Foundation, said other countries have deployed trade barriers, subsidized their products, and committed intellectual property theft. What Trump is talking about here is using these tariffs not as tariffs themselves, but as a negotiating tool of statcraft to break down these barriers and actually get to truly free and open global trade, he told CNN. That's the goal. Some context: the Heritage Foundation is a leading conservative think tank with long roots in Washington and had a major role in organizing Project 2025. The conservative blueprint for U.S. President Donald Trump's second term in office. Leading economists have told CNN they feared the tariffs could lead to a global recession if they aren't quickly pulled back. President Donald Trump's historic tariff announcement will have a lasting impact on South Asia, where the U.S. is a top export destination for many countries in the region, analysts say. The region, which includes the world's most populous country, India, as well as Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, is dealing with varying levels of economic stress, he said. There's a lot of vulnerability, and the tariffs will hit hard, said Michael Kugelman, South Asia Institute director at the Wilson Center, a U.S.-based think tank. Trump imposed the highest tariffs in the region on Sri Lanka at 44%. The island nation is still recovering from an economic crisis that contributed to the toppling of its government. It is now dependent on a bailout from the International Monetary Fund (IMF). Bangladesh, which has a major garment industry, is also expected to grapple with economic pressure after Trump placed 37% tariffs on imports from there. The U.S. has historically been a top destination for Bangladesh's garment exports. Trump's announcement could reduce the competitiveness of the industry, affecting jobs in the sector. Both Bangladesh and Sri Lanka would be severely impacted as access to the U.S., their largest export market, would be restricted, according to Biswajit Dar, a distinguished professor at the Council for Social Development in New Delhi. India was slapped with some of the highest tariff rates for a major U.S. trading partner, but at 26% was not hit as its Asian peers. New Delhi made many earlier concessions to Washington to try to shield itself, but it didn't work, said Kugelman. Its saving grace now is a bilateral trade deal it's negotiating with the U.S., he added. The stakes of these talks are high, as a deal would reduce tariffs on both sides and bring India some relief. Pravin Khandelwal, a politician from India's ruling party and head of the Confederation of All India Traders, said the government would talk to the Trump administration about how to ensure a minimal impact on the trade between America and India.